Hello, everyone. Welcome to LMTI's Mental Health 101 webinar. My name is Rachel Taylor. I am the Assistant Supervisor at LMTI. If you're not familiar with our program, LMTI is a program of partners in prevention. We are a nonprofit based in Secaucus, and we serve communities all throughout New Jersey, all the way from Salem County up to Bergen County. Um, our primary focus is prevention, that's drug prevention, alcohol, tobacco, other drugs. We also have a strong suicide prevention focus, and we do a lot of mental health trainings. And our other component is youth leadership. We hold a lot of conferences, custom training, special events, things that help empower teens throughout New Jersey to make the positive change that they want to see in the community. So if you're interested in learning more about our program, you can check out njlmti.org, or you can find us on social media on any platform at the handle at njlmti. So let's get started with our mental health training. Mental health is a hard thing to define. So here's a broad definition from mentalhealth.gov. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And it also helps to determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. We talk about mental health because there's a lot of stigma associated with it. What I mean by that is that, you know, that mark of disgrace, that stereotyping, um, that feeling that a lot of individuals have when they do have mental health issues, just because of the way that people label them. And that labeling, we know, leads to prejudice and discrimination. There's often, that belief that individuals with mental health disorders are untreatable or difficult or not intelligent or so many other things that are just not true. I'm sure we've all heard people say, oh, they're crazy or a nutcase, or if we're talking about somebody with a substance use disorder, maybe using words like a junkie or a druggie. That's all stigmatized language. And it's important that we try to break down that language and not use it, because this can all lead to abuse, rejection, isolation, um, and really just make everyone feel worse, right? It's that exclusion um, from their community, from their friends, from people using language like this. So I think that's important to say before we start talking about this. Another reason we talk about mental health is because we all have it. Um, that's me, very happy. I have mental health in that picture. One of my coworkers, he's got it too. A stock image of somebody being sad. They've got mental health, even celebrities, and your grandma, and probably Edward Cullen too. We've all got mental health. So it affects everyone in different ways. It's because it's on a spectrum. Um, I like this chart because it kind of shows how we can flow between um, kind of being mentally well versus the other side, the red and the orange, where we might be in crisis or be feeling mentally unwell. Um, it's just important to recognize that, like I said, we all have it and we just might be on different parts of the continuum. Um, and that's okay. And we might fluctuate from day to day too, especially in a crisis situation when there are different things going on in the world and we're trying to figure out how to handle things. We might be feeling pretty good one day and then swing back pretty quickly in the other direction. Um, and that's okay. We're talking about this because that happens to so many people. Um, if you look at the statistics, 1 in 6 youth aged 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder each year. That's from NAMI.org, the National Alliance of Mental Illness. They have some great resources. Definitely check them out. That's a lot, 1 in 6. If you work in a school, that's just think of how many students you interact with daily and what that means. Or if you have a family and you've got kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, just think 1 in 6. That's pretty high. Um, 30% of teens report feeling overwhelmed or depressed as a result of stress. That's from APA. Again, a pretty high number. And we look at different statistics from, you know, throughout the nation, from adults, from youth, in New Jersey. And the numbers show that this is something that affects most people. A lot of factors contribute to our mental health state. It's our day-to-day lives, right? It's, I had a really good day. I got an A on my exam. I'm feeling pretty good. Or it's, oh, this is not a great day. I failed that exam and I stubbed my toe and I'm just really upset. Everything is going wrong. Our brain chemistry too plays a role in that. Um, we know that, our genetics are a huge factor in this. They might have us be predisposed to depression or other mental health disorders. Our socioeconomic status. I think especially in times of crisis or when people are losing their jobs and money is a big issue. Just think about that. uh, I don't have the money, I'm getting stressed out now, I can't even afford to go get help. There's so many different things that encapsulate mental health when it comes to socioeconomic status. Our gender and sexuality too. um, how other people might perceive us or judge us based on those things can take a toll on people's mental health. Global and cultural events, basically everything factors into our mental health state. So, what might I see or notice when someone is in that mentally unwell, that red and orange stage of that spectrum? Well, it could be a lot of different things. Um, like I said before, mental health is how we think, how we feel, how we act. So it could be physical things you're noticing, what's going on with their body, how are they feeling, emotional things, what are we thinking, and behavioral, how are we acting, what do we see on the outside. Um, I do have the disclaimer in here that, recognizing signs or symptoms in yourself or a friend or a student doesn't automatically indicate a mental illness or mental injury or, on that mental unwell side of the spectrum. But the inverse is true too. We all put on some form of a mask as we go out into the world. And, somebody could seem like they're the strongest kid that you interact with at school, but things could be going on at home. So, um, basically, you just can't diagnose somebody, right? If you notice any of the things that we'll go through, I think having a conversation with a student or whoever you notice them is important. So there are so many different signs and symptoms. I just have a couple on here that we'll go through. It could be, like I said, observations that you make. So seeing somebody trembling or shaking. I always think of, like, when I get anxious, my knee starts going and I'm jittering. Or sadness or depressed mood, right? Confusion, not really knowing what's going on, kind of seems out of it. Memory loss, hearing voices, having visions. Um, a lot of different things that you might see. Just if somebody is acting out of the ordinary, right? Things that they're not normally doing, or if there's kind of a drastic mood shift or behavioral shift. Speaking of behaviors, maybe they have the inability to sit still, responding inappropriately to things, poor hygiene, talking to themselves, use of drugs and alcohol, pretty common when people are trying to cope with mental health disorders. So there's a lot of different things you might see, but it's important to notice and just recognize that these signs and symptoms can look differently for everyone. Um, you know, if somebody's depressed, they might, um, you kind of picture that stereotypical depressed, right? I'm crying, I'm sleeping all day, I don't have the energy to get up and shower, I'm isolating myself. And that's kind of that stereotypical picture of depression. But in teenage boys in particular, depression might look like acting out and screaming and a lot of anger issues. But that is at the same intention almost. All of that is to isolate oneself, but it can manifest in different ways. Um, so definitely, if you're interested in learning more about signs and symptoms, I would check out the National Council for Behavioral Health. They have tons of resources and things to look out for and things you might notice. But like I said, everything manifests differently for people. Um, we're all individuals. Mental health is no exception. So I'm sure a lot of us listening to this webinar, if you're interested in mental health, maybe it's part of your job. If you're working with students, you probably have heard of a lot of these different diagnoses. Um, there are so many different diagnoses. I think the DSM has upwards of like 150 with so many different subcategories, but these are just some of the common ones you might have heard. And if you haven't heard of these, definitely I would do some research onto them and kind of understand a little bit more about them. Um, Anxiety disorders, attention deficit disorder, um, bipolar disorder, depression, eating disorders, OCD, phobias, PTSD, schizophrenia, substance use disorders. This is kind of what we see on the front lines or things we might have heard of. So there, like I said, there's so many different things we could be talking about, but I just want to take a second to talk about stress, right? Because we all experience stress in some way, some form or another. Um, I'm sure we've all experienced stress just in today, whenever you're sitting down and listening to this webinar. It's common, it's normal, and we all feel it from time to time. Remember this from the beginning? 30% of teens report feeling overwhelmed or depressed as a result of stress. Well, 34% of teens predict that their stress is going to increase in the next year. Think about that. I think as adults, sometimes we might downplay the stress that our students, our teens, our children, whomever um, are going through, but they feel stressed too. And it's important that we acknowledge that and we validate them and we hear them out. So we all know what stress is, right? It's that state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. It arises when something is perceived as dangerous, threatening, urgent, or important. And I bolded perceived there because the things that cause us to feel stress can be very different. It could be, I don't know, a pandemic. It could be something very different, though. It could be needing to get to the store before it closes, or that you have a big presentation tomorrow, or that you want to ask somebody to prom. It's that something that's perceived as threatening, dangerous, urgent, or important. There's different types of stress. We've got kind of our good stress and our bad stress. That good stress is, the roller coaster feeling, right? It's being nervous before your big solo in the concert. It's stress that motivates us, focuses us, and is relatively short term. Typically, it's very exciting. It helps us improve our experience or performance. Like I love the roller coaster example because I just think of being nervous, going up, 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 and then as you hit the downward side of that roller coaster, you're just like screaming and laughing, and it's really fun for some people. But distress is quite the opposite, and that's that typical stress that we usually think of. It's anxiety, it's being concerned, it's feeling unpleasant, and it can lead to physical and mental problems, right? Whenever we feel that stress, whether it's that good stress or that bad stress, or positive or negative stress, it triggers the fight or flight response. I'm sure a lot of us have heard of that. You might have even heard of fight or flight or freeze or faint. There's a lot of options in there, but basically that's your parasympathetic nervous system activating. I've got this stress and alarms are going off. I've got to go into survival mode. Adrenaline is pumping through my body, and I, have got to figure out what is the safest thing for me to do. Uh, Run away, freeze, or try and do something and fight back. Um, that stress response can then create some physiological and psychological responses. Again, I'm sure we're all familiar with some of these. And just like in all the signs and symptoms before, it's physical, it's mental, it's emotional. So maybe it's nausea, headaches, sweating, twitching, rapid breathing. A lot of times, especially in young people, you hear, "Oh, my stomach hurts," or "I'm just not feeling good." And that might just be a stress response for some people. Um, Poor concentration, anger, helplessness, emotional numbness. I know for example, if I'm feeling stressed, and I've got so many things to do, it's almost like I have 10 million things to do, but I have no idea where to start. So it's just easier to do nothing. That's that helplessness. I can't concentrate on anything. Um, Emotional outbursts, inability to rest, substance abuse as well. Uh, what happens when we feel stress? We kind of just walked through this. It's that alarm and then some resistance, right? Your body's reacting to the rush or the stressor. And then you might be fatigued, right? You're tired of dealing with this. You're tired of dealing with the nausea and the poor concentration and the emotional outbursts and all of that. Um, Eventually, we hope that it gets to a release or a resolution, right? um, I have Psyduck on here because if you're familiar with Pokemon, his way, when he gets too stressed out, he just screams. And that might be a release, right? And you might feel better after that, but that's not really resolving what's going on. So let's talk about the release or the resolution here. I think this is a lot easier said than done, but we do have a couple of simple steps that might help, either if you're dealing with something yourself, or if you're trying to help somebody, a student, or a member of your youth task force, whatever it might be, uh, deal with stress. Here's a couple of steps. I think the first important thing is just identifying the stressor, recognizing that it exists, it's real, and pinpointing what exactly is, causing the stress, the anxiety, the uneasiness. Then you've got to look and see, okay, um, do I have control over this? Is this something like avoiding a certain situation, or is it something more of a global issue that don't have control over? And just recognizing what your level of control is important. Um, then identifying, okay, can I eliminate this? If you can, let's work to do that. Let's find a healthy way to do that. And if you can't, we've really got to work on developing the skills needed to deal with it, right? Building that resiliency and kind of your toolbox of skills that you might use for this stressor or for other things in your life. And those skills are coping mechanisms, right? And coping mechanisms can be unhealthy. We know this. Smoking, binge drinking, drug use, isolating yourself, compulsive spending. How many times have you heard somebody just say, "Oh, it's just retail therapy. I'm just buying these things to make myself feel better," which is just gonna possibly stress you out more because now there might be money problems. Avoiding the problem. That's one way to forget about it. But then it usually ends up just snowballing and getting bigger. Sleeping all day, or disordered eating. A lot of this is about control, right? Because that second step, identify your control over the stressor. That's what this is about. And if you don't have control over it, a lot of people might start taking control into their own hands through these unhealthy coping mechanisms, to feel that sense of release. Uh, we see a lot of things about alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs on here. Um, Addiction and mental health disorders often co-occur. According to NAMI, about 1/3 to 1/2 of individuals with mental health disorders also struggle with addiction, and vice versa. So 9.2 million US adults experienced both mental illness and a substance use disorder in 2018, and that's from NAMI. So we really, really, really want to try to get rid of these unhealthy coping mechanisms. We want to learn and teach healthy coping mechanisms. Um, whether it's exercising and feeling that release by letting the endorphins flow through your body, right? Even if it's just stretching for a little bit every day. Meditating is a really helpful tool. There's so many different apps out there, YouTube videos, free books that'll help you with guided meditations. Listening to music, pretty common. Most people enjoy music, so finding something that's soothing to you and just kind of listening to that while breathing and focusing on your breath. Giving yourself a pep talk. Um, I love doing this. Whenever I'm stressed out about a presentation or something relatively low risk for myself, not causing me a lot of stress, I'll just give myself a pep talk and try and get myself excited for the event. Writing in a journal can be very cathartic. Playing with a pet, cleaning. Again, there's a lot of, control involved in cleaning, just kind of like the unhealthy ones. Just with all of these things on the healthy side, just, being mindful and making sure it's still healthy for us. It's making us feel good. It's not something that's becoming obsessive or becoming detrimental to us. Coloring, making art, and then asking for help. So important. That is a coping mechanism. Being able to be, uh, uh, you know, reaching out to somebody. That's a great skill to learn. It's a hard one to learn, but it's super important. Engaging in problem solving as well. We know on the unhealthy side, there was one that just said avoiding the problem. So being able to engage in this problem solving is important. There are tons of stress tips and different examples of healthy coping mechanisms on the CDC and on NAMI and so many other places. Instagram has a lot. Just Google healthy coping mechanisms and you'll find tons of lists, 100 things you can do if you're stressed. So if you don't have that activity that, helps calm you or helps reset or refocus you, there's a lot of sources out there to help you find it. So what can we do? We've just spent, 20 minutes talking about mental health, what it looks like. Um, but what is our role now? Well, the first thing is to stomp out stigma. I mentioned stigmatized language in the beginning and how that can be really hurtful. So I think it's just important now that, we know better, we do better. So if we find ourselves using terms that, you know, are not super helpful, might be labeling, just recognizing that and apologizing and trying to do better next time. Supporting your peers. We'll go over a few ways that you can support your peers or you can teach your students to support their peers, and sharing resources. I'll show you quite a few in the next couple of slides. So if you find yourself um, helping someone who might be in a crisis or is upset, don't worry, you got this. Just stay calm and try your best using the following tips. Listening non-judgmentally is really important. A lot of times, if somebody's coming to you and they're being open and they're speaking, they just might need to get everything off of their chest, right? It's when a when that tea kettle is on your stove and it's shaking and you just let the steam off, sometimes people just need to do that, right? So listening, and again, non-judgmentally is really important too. Um, we're not here to judge anybody. We all have our different stories and our different reasons for why we do things. So just being there to hear them out. Being genuine is really important too. Um, you don't need to put on your, I like to call it the therapist voice, and oh yes, that must be really hard. Just talk normally, right? No need to put up a front. It's okay to say, hey, I hear you, and that might be hard. You don't need to say, there's no right words, right? There's not a playbook and a script. So just being your authentic self and listening and being real with them. Validating their feelings. It's takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength and bravery to be able to say, hey, I need help and this is what's going on in my life. And we don't want to shut anybody down. So doing our best just to validate where they are, and make sure that they know, hey, like that's okay that you're feeling this way. And I'm glad you're here you're telling me this, because it sounds really hard, and I hope we can get you to the resources that you need. Don't offer unsolicited advice. Um, no shoulds. Don't tell people what they should do. You know, I think we never fully know the whole picture. We only know as much as someone is telling us. Um, and offering unsolicited advice, well, one, it's just maybe not the best thing to do. Maybe they just want somebody to listen, like I said before. But two, you really never know that full picture. You could say, oh, okay, you're feeling this. Well, we really need to talk to mom and dad about this. Well, maybe mom and dad are the root of the problem. Maybe there's something going on that we don't know about. So unsolicited advice is never recommended. Um, Offer to explore options for help together. Um, I, I think, offering to just, hey, I can go with you if you need it, or hey, I can help you research. I know some resources already. And just, being there for them throughout that process, because asking for help is really hard, but then finding the help is also extremely hard, for a number of reasons. So just being there with them, through that, and then just checking in and following up with them later, letting them know you really care. Um, it's not just, I'll listen to you right now while you're here, and then I'll forget about it when you're gone. Um, so these are just a few tips that I find really helpful, and I would definitely recommend sharing with your students or teaching them as they, go about as peer leaders and might be encountering different situations. Um, and they're just good life skills, right? So I have some resources here. Um, Feel free to take out your phone, take a picture. I have these phone numbers saved to my phone because I don't always remember them. And if I'm somewhere and I need it, I need to refer somebody, I just always have them. Suicide Prevention Lifeline, Crisis Text Line, and the Trevor Lifeline for LGBTQ plus individuals. They're all 24/7, open 24/7 hotlines, totally free, that can help refer to help. I love the text line too, because it's not always easy to talk to somebody. So the text line is also great. General resources, when we are in our school, there's so many, just making students aware of them. I think for the most part, students might know this, but they might not connect the dots to where they can go to get help if they're in a crisis situation. Same with community. There's so many people out there, coalitions, doctors, so many teachers out there. And if that fails, LMTI is always an option. Other nonprofits, if they message us, we can get them in contact with um, somebody in their school or somebody closer to the situation to help them out. Online resources are great too. Again, there's so many support groups meant for every different uh, subsect of where somebody might be. So if they're struggling with alcohol or narcotics or eating disorders, whatever it might be, there is almost certainly a group for them, and a nonprofit with valid resources and information. Um, so we'll make sure this gets shared in a PDF version as well, just so everybody has it. The NAMI, again, top of the right column here, and SAMHSA and AFSP, all have great resources if you're ever looking to share anything on social media or any campaigns, anything like that. And then the three below it, Mental Health America, mentalhealth.gov, and they'll have great statistics, and Perform Care if you're working with somebody to get them, um, a screening or therapy or resources. Perform Care NJ is very helpful too. So with all of that, I'm just here to remind everybody that there's hope. There's help out there, and recovery is possible. I thank all of you who took the time to listen to this and learn a little bit more. You all are mental health rock stars, and I know you I hope you don't have to use these skills, but I know realistically that there's probably someone you'll encounter in your life, or may have already know them, that could definitely benefit from these. So I hope you spread this information, spread our resources. Feel free to share, and keep doing the great work you're doing. Thanks so much for listening. If you do have any questions or are looking for more resources, feel free to email me. My email is rtaylor@pipnj.org, like Partners in Prevention New Jersey. It's PIPNJ. You can also check out our website, njlmti.org, or any of our social medias. Thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And we hope you'll tune in for the next webinar in our series.